The leak had been dripping for 6 days before anyone bothered to report it. Ravi Deshpande crawled through a maintenance tunnel on deck 14, dragging his toolbox behind him with one hand and holding a flashlight between his teeth with the other. The tunnel smelled like rust and old coolant. Most people on Pallavi 9 station never came down here. Most people did not even know these tunnels existed. But Ravi knew every pipe, every junction, every cracked seal on this station the way a farmer knows his fields that he found the leak. A hairline fracture in a secondary coolant pipe, weeping green fluid onto the floor in a slow, steady rhythm. He wiped his hands on his overalls, pulled out a sealing torch, and got to work. "You have been hurting for a while," he said to the pipe, the way he always talked to things he was fixing. Nobody noticed, but I am here now. Ravi was 41 years old. He had brown skin, calloused hands, and a face that looked like it had been designed for smiling, but had forgotten how somewhere along the way. He had lived on Pallavi 9 for 11 years. Before that, he had lived in Pune, India, on Earth. Before that, he had lived a different life entirely. A life with his wife Priya, who used to laugh at the way he apologized to broken appliances before repairing them. Priya had been gone for 12 years now. Cancer, the humankind that the galactic medical community considered too unimportant to research a cure for Ravi had left Earth. Not because he was brave or adventurous, because everything on Earth reminded him of her, and the pain of it was a weight he could not carry anymore. He had come to the stars looking for distance, and he had found it here, in the guts of a station where nobody looked at him twice. Pallavi 9 was a galactic commerce station, a massive orbital hub where dozens of alien species came to trade, negotiate, and occasionally argue. It floated in neutral space, belonging to no empire and governed by a council of species representatives. 40,000 beings lived here. Kralith diplomats with their scaled hides and ancient eyes. Fenari engineers with 4 arms and sharp, clicking mandibles. Terali merchants who could change the color of their skin to match their moods. And humans. A handful of humans, mostly doing jobs that nobody else wanted. Maintenance technician was one of those jobs. Ravi sealed the pipe, tested the pressure, and nodded to himself. Fixed. He packed his tools and crawled back out of the tunnel, emerging into a corridor on the lower decks where the lights flickered and the air always tasted faintly of metal. Dolly was waiting for him. She was Fenari, 7 feet tall, with a hard exoskeleton the color of dark copper and 4 arms that could each work independently on separate tasks. Her compound eyes reflected the corridor lights like tiny galaxies. She was the station's senior structural engineer, and she was the closest thing Ravi had to a friend. "You were in the tunnels again?" she said. Her voice had a clicking quality, like someone tapping stones together in a rhythm. "Coolant leak on 14, Ravi said, brushing dust off his shoulders. "That section is scheduled for repair next month." The pipe did not want to wait until next month. Dolly tilted her head. After 11 years, she still found humans confusing. They were small, soft, short-lived, and had no natural defenses worth mentioning. "No venom, no armor, no telepathy." The galactic community considered them unremarkable at best. A young species still figuring things out. Tolerated on stations like Pallavi 9 because they were willing to do the work others found beneath them. But Dolly had watched Ravi for years, and something about him did not fit the profile. He worked harder than anyone she knew. He volunteered for the worst jobs. He treated broken equipment with a gentleness that the Fenari reserved for their young. "Why do you always take the worst assignments?" she asked. She had asked this before. She liked his answer. Ravi shrugged. "Broken things deserve someone who cares enough to fix them." Dolly's mandibles clicked softly. Among her people, though it almost passed for philosophy, they walked together toward the central hub, where the station opened into a vast atrium filled with beings from across the galaxy. Kralith elders debated trade routes in low, rumbling voices. Terali children chased each other between market stalls, their skin flashing bright pink with excitement. A group of Fenari engineers argued over structural blueprints with the intensity of generals planning a war. Ravi moved through it all like a ghost. Nobody greeted him. Nobody stopped him. He was invisible here, Just another small human in a galaxy full of bigger, louder, more important beings that he was fine with that. Then the alarm went off that IT was not the standard maintenance alarm or the shift change bell. It was the deep, resonant tone of a proximity alert, the kind that meant something large and unexpected had just appeared near the station. Ravi and Dolly stopped. Around them, the atrium went quiet. 40,000 beings held their breath at once. The station's communication system crackled to life, and Captain Orini's voice filled every corridor and chamber on Pallavi 9. Attention all residents. An unidentified vessel has dropped out of hyperspace approximately 2 kilometers from the station. The vessel is heavily damaged and leaking radiation. It is broadcasting a distress signal in an unrecognized language. All non-essential personnel are to remain in their quarters. Emergency teams report to Docking Bay 7. Ravi looked at Dolly. Dolly looked at Ravi. I am non-essential personnel, Ravi said. You are, Dolly agreed. Ravi picked up his toolbox. Their ship is damaged. Damaged things need fixing. He walked toward Docking Bay 7. Dolly watched him go. Then she picked up her own tools and followed. She never could explain why. Nobody had ever seen a ship held together by light before. The refugee vessel drifted into Docking Bay 7 like a dying animal crawling toward shelter. Its hull was torn open in a dozen places, venting atmosphere in thin white streams. Radiation warnings flickered across every scanner in the bay. But the strangest thing was the light. Wherever the hull was breached, a soft blue glow pulsed from inside, as if the ship itself was trying to hold its own wounds closed. Ravi stood at the edge of the docking platform with his toolbox at his feet, watching the emergency teams guide the wreck into a cradle. Dolly stood beside him, her 4 arms folded tightly across her chest. The structural damage is beyond repair, Dolly said quietly. That ship should not have survived the jump. But it did, Ravi said. The airlock opened, and the refugees came out. They were Milori. Ravi had never seen one before. Most people on Pallavi 9 had not. They were a species from the far outer spiral, so remote that they barely appeared in galactic records. They were small, the tallest among them reaching only to Ravi's chest. Their skin was smooth and pale, almost translucent, and beneath it ran threads of bioluminescence that pulsed in soft, shifting patterns. Blues, greens, faint golds. They did not speak. They communicated through those patterns of light, their bodies flickering in silent conversation. 200 of them filed out of the broken ship. Families, elders, children. They moved slowly, blinking in the harsh station lights, their glow dim and unsteady. They looked exhausted. They looked afraid. The medical teams moved in. Translators were activated, but the Milori language of light was not in any database. Communication was reduced to gestures and patience. Within the hour, the station council convened. Ravi was not invited. He was a maintenance technician. He had no rank, no title, no voice in political matters. But the council session was broadcast on the station's internal channel, and he listened from the docking bay while helping patch the worst of the refugee ship's hull breaches. High Arbiter Suvin spoke first. He was Kralith, old beyond measure, with dark green scales and eyes like polished amber. His voice carried the weight of someone who had made difficult decisions for centuries and had stopped feeling guilty about them long ago. The Milori are fleeing a territorial purge, Suvin said. The Herakan Dominion has claimed their home world and is systematically removing their population. These 200 are likely among the last survivors. He paused. The council chamber was silent. However, Suvin continued. Granting asylum to the Milori carries significant risk. The Herakan Dominion does not tolerate interference. Sheltering their targets could be interpreted as an act of opposition. Pallavi 9 is a commerce station, not a military installation. We are not equipped for conflict. The vote was called. Species by species, the representatives spoke. The Fenari voted no. Strategic liability, their representatives said. The Kralith voted no. Not our conflict. The Terali voted no. Trade disruption is unacceptable. Every single species voted no. The decision was announced over the intercom in a flat, neutral tone. The Mealori would be provided with 72 hours of emergency supplies. Their ship would be given basic repairs. Then they would be sent back into open space to find shelter elsewhere. Somewhere else. Anywhere else. Not here. Ravi heard the announcement while crouched inside the refugee ship's lower cargo hold, welding a support beam back into place. He stopped working. He set down his torch. He sat there in the dark for a long time. Then he heard something that a faint sound, like a small animal shifting in the corner. He turned his flashlight toward the back of the hold, past collapsed storage containers and tangles of severed cable. That a child was hiding there, that a Mealori child. Small even by their standards, barely reaching Ravi's knee. The child's skin was almost dark, bioluminescence reduced to the faintest flicker of pale blue. The child was curled into a tight ball, pressed into the corner as if trying to disappear into the wall. Ravi turned off his welding torch. He set down his tools. He moved slowly, carefully, the way you approach a frightened animal. He sat down on the floor about 2 meters from the child and said nothing. The child's light flickered. Quick, erratic pulses. Fear. Ravi did not move closer. He just sat. He breathed. He let the silence settle. Minutes passed. 5. 10. The child's flickering slowed. The pulses grew longer, steadier. The pale blue deepened slightly. Ravi reached into his pocket and pulled out a protein bar. He broke it in half, set one piece on the floor between them, and ate the other half himself. He chewed slowly, looking at nothing in particular. The child watched him. After a long moment, a thin, translucent hand reached out and took the protein bar. The child ate it in tiny, careful bites. Ravi smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in a way that reached his eyes in a very long time. I am Ravi, he said softly. He pointed to himself. Ravi. The child's light shifted. A new pattern. Soft, uncertain, but no longer afraid. Ravi would later learn that the child's name, translated roughly from light language, meant something close to small song. He would call the child Ludo because it was simple and gentle and felt right. But that came later. Right now, Ravi sat on the floor of a broken ship with a frightened child he could not speak to, listening to the echo of a council decision that would send this child back into the dark that Ludo's glow steadied. Slowly, carefully, the child leaned sideways and rested against Ravi's arm. Ravi did not move, he just sat there, in the wreckage, holding still for someone who needed him to, and something inside him that had been quiet for 12 years began to wake up. The council chamber had not seen a human walk through its doors in 9 years. The last one had been a trade envoy who had gotten lost looking for the cafeteria. She had apologized, turned around, and left. The council members had found it mildly amusing. Humans were like that. Small, confused, always slightly out of place in rooms designed for larger beings. When Ravi Deshpande walked through the tall arched entrance of the Pallavi 9 council chamber, still wearing his maintenance overalls with coolant stains on the knees, carrying no documents, no datapad, no formal request, the reaction was not alarm. It was confusion. High Arbiter Suvin looked up from his elevated seat at the center of the curved council table. His amber eyes narrowed. Around him, representatives from a dozen species shifted in their chairs, antennae twitching, scales rustling, skin colors changing with surprise. This is a closed session, Suvin said. His voice was calm, the way deep water is calm. I know, Ravi said. I would like to speak. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Dolly, who had followed Ravi and now stood frozen in the doorway, felt something between admiration and horror. Humans did not speak before the council. Maintenance workers did not speak before the council. This was simply not done. Suvin studied Ravi for a long moment. The Kralith were ancient beings, and Suvin was old even by their standards. He had seen empires rise and collapse. He had watched entire species burn themselves out through war and pride. He recognized something in this small human standing alone in the middle of a room built for giants. Stubbornness. The quiet, unmovable kind. Speak, Suvin said. Ravi did not step onto the formal speaking platform. He did not raise his voice. He stood where he was, a maintenance worker in a room full of diplomats. and he spoke the way he always spoke. Simply, directly, like he was talking to a broken pipe. "I am not a soldier," he said. "I'm not a diplomat. I fix things. That is what I do. I have done it on this station for 11 years, and I have never asked for anything. I have never complained. I have never caused trouble." He paused. The chamber was completely silent. There are 200 people in Docking Bay 7 right now. They have lost their home. They have lost everything. They came here because they had nowhere else to go. And this council has decided to give them 3 days of food and push them back into space. Suvin's expression did not change. The council's decision was made through proper procedure. The risks of sheltering Heracon targets are well documented. "I know," Ravi said. "I'm not asking you to change your decision." That surprised them. The murmuring stopped. "I am invoking the residency provision," Ravi said. Section 14, Article 9 of the Pahlavi 9 Founding Charter. Any permanent resident of the station may sponsor incoming persons for residency by assuming full legal and financial responsibility for their presence. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight to it. Ravi could feel it pressing against his chest. Suvin leaned forward slowly. "You are aware of what that provision requires." "I am." "Full liability. If the Milori cause any incident, any damage, any disruption to station operations, the responsibility falls entirely on you. Your wages will be garnished. Your quarters can be seized. Your personal freedom can be restricted. You are one man assuming responsibility for 200 beings. I understand. And you are aware," Suvin continued, his voice dropping lower, "that the Heracon Dominion will view this as a provocation. Not by the station. By you. Personally, I understand that too." "Why?" The question came not from Suvin, but from the Fenerai representative, a senior official who looked at Ravi the way one might look at a small creature doing something inexplicable. Ravi was quiet for a moment. He thought about Ludo, curled up in the cargo hold, glow dimming in the dark. He thought about a small hand reaching for a piece of a protein bar. He thought about Priya, who used to say that the world was not broken beyond repair. It was just waiting for someone patient enough to care. "Because there's a child down there," Ravi said. "And that child has already lost everything. A home, a family, a world. And the only thing standing between that child and the dark is whether someone in this station decides to give a damn." His voice did not rise. It did not crack. It was steady and plain and quiet, and it filled the chamber like water filling a glass. Nobody spoke. After what felt like a very long time, Suvin said, "The residency provision is valid. If you invoke it formally, the council is bound to honor it." "I invoke it formally," Ravi said. And that was it. No applause. No dramatic moment of triumph. Just a tired man in stained overalls standing in a room full of beings who could not quite believe what had just happened. Dolly caught him in the corridor afterward. She grabbed his arm with 2 of her 4 hands and turned him to face her. "Have you lost your mind?" she asked. Ravi looked at her. "Maybe. You just made yourself personally responsible for 200 refugees. You will lose your quarters. You will lose your savings. If anything goes wrong, you will lose your freedom." "I know." "Then what?" Ravi leaned against the corridor wall. He looked tired. Not the tired of a long shift, but the tired of a man who had carried something heavy for a very long time and had just picked up more. "Because I kept thinking about that child," he said. "And I could not be the kind of man who walks away from a child who has already lost everything." Dolly stared at him. Her mandibles clicked softly, the Fenerai equivalent of a sigh. "You humans are impossible," she said. "Yes," Ravi agreed. "We are." Somewhere in the outer spiral, a Heracon communications officer flagged a new report from Pahlavi 9 that a single human had just defied galactic consensus. The report was forwarded to Fleet Command. Ludo learned the word good on the 3rd day. Ravi had not tried to teach it. He had simply said it while repairing a water recycler in the corridor outside the Milori quarters. The recycler had been clogged for weeks, and when it finally hummed back to life, clean water flowing through the pipes again, Ravi had patted the machine and said, "Good." Ludo, who had been sitting cross-legged on the floor watching him work, flickered a warm amber glow across the skin of both arms. and then opened that small mouth and whispered the word back. Good. It was barely a sound, more breath than voice. But it was the first word anyone had heard a Milori speak aloud on Pallavi. 9. And Ravi had to turn away for a moment so the child would not see his eyes getting wet. 3 weeks had passed since Ravi invoked the residency provision. 3 weeks since the council had grudgingly accepted his sponsorship of 200 Milori refugees. In 3 weeks since Ravi's life had changed completely, he had given up his quarters on Deck 9, a small but private room that had been his home for 11 years. The Milori families needed space, and the station was not going to provide it, so Ravi did. He moved his few belongings into a storage closet on Deck 14, near the maintenance tunnels. The closet had no window, no ventilation beyond what leaked through the door seal, and just enough room for a sleeping mat and his toolbox that he worked double shifts now. The residency provision meant he was financially responsible for the Milori's resource consumption, and 200 people consumed a lot of resources. His wages were garnished automatically, the station's systems deducting the cost before he ever saw a credit. He ate 1 meal a day. He slept 4 hours a night. He did not complain. The Milori, for their part, were trying. They were a gentle species, quiet and careful, moving through the station's corridors with a kind of soft nervousness that made them nearly invisible. Their bioluminescence drew stares from other residents, some curious, some hostile. But they caused no trouble. They asked for nothing beyond what Ravi had provided. And slowly, they began to offer something back. It turned out that Milori bioluminescence was not just communication. It was bioengineering. Their light could interact with organic material at a cellular level. A Milori elder named Pava, a dignified figure whose glow was a steady deep green, demonstrated this to Dolly by placing both hands on a section of hull that had been patched with organic sealant. The sealant, which normally degraded within months, bonded permanently under Pava's touch, the bioluminescent energy fusing it at a molecular level. Dolly had stared at her own scanner readings for a full minute before saying, very quietly, "This changes everything." But not everyone saw it that way. Ravi found the first message scratched into his locker on the morning of the second week. A crude drawing of a human figure with an arrow pointing to an airlock. The meaning was clear. Go home. His tools went missing the next day. He found them in a waste recycler, half-melted. On the third week, someone left a dead maintenance drone outside the Milori quarters with a note attached in 3 languages. It said the same thing in each one. Parasites. Ravi cleaned it up before the Milori families could see it. He told Dolly about it later, sitting in the dim light of Deck 14, eating his 1 meal of the day, a tasteless ration pack that was all he could afford now. You should report it, Dolly said. She was angry. Her mandibles were clicking rapidly, a sign of agitation. To who? Ravi asked. The council does not care. Station security has bigger problems. And whoever is doing this wants me to react. They want me to make noise, so the council has a reason to revoke the provision. So you will do nothing. I will keep fixing things, Ravi said. That is what I do. Dolly watched him eat. She had been studying humans for 11 years through the lens of this one man, and she still did not fully understand them. Any Fenarai in his situation would have calculated the cost-benefit ratio and withdrawn. Any Kralith would have leveraged the situation for political advantage. But Ravi simply absorbed the punishment and kept going. Not out of pride, not out of strategy, out of something that the Fenarai language did not have a word for. The closest Dolly could come was a phrase from an old Fenarai poem, one who carries fire into the dark for strangers. It was considered a myth, a thing from stories, not something real beings actually did. Ludo was with Ravi almost constantly now. The child had attached to him with a quiet, total trust that Ravi found both wonderful and terrifying. They had developed their own language. Warm amber meant happy. Flickering blue meant scared. Steady white meant trust. Rapid green meant excited. And a slow, deep purple that Ludo sometimes glowed when Ravi said good night meant something that Ravi suspected was close to love. He had not felt that glow directed at him since It was late on a Tuesday, station time, when Dolly found Ravi in the maintenance tunnels on Deck 14. She was not clicking. She was not speaking. She stood in the tunnel entrance with all four arms hanging at her sides, and a look in her compound eyes that Ravi had never seen before. Fear. What happened? Ravi asked. Captain Orini intercepted a transmission 20 minutes ago, Dully said. A HFY War fleet has changed course. 6 heavy cruisers. They are heading directly for Pallavi 9. Ravi set down his wrench. They are coming for the Milori, Dully said. And they are coming for you. In the storage closet that served as his home, Ravi could hear Ludo humming softly in the Milori quarters down the hall. A wordless, gentle sound. The first song anyone had heard on Deck 14 in years. Ravi picked up his wrench again. Then I had better finish fixing this pipe, he said. Fear has a sound, and on Pallavi 9, it sounded like 40,000 beings all talking at once. The news of the HFY War fleet spread through the station in minutes. It moved through the market stalls and the engineering bays and the residential decks like a living thing, growing louder and sharper with every retelling. 6 heavy cruisers, military grade. Enough firepower to reduce a commerce station to floating scrap in under an hour. By morning, 3 trade ships had already undocked and fled. By afternoon, the number was 12. The station's population began to fracture along the lines that always appear when danger arrives. Some demanded action. Some demanded surrender. Some simply packed their belongings and looked for the fastest way out. And in the middle of it all, the council called an emergency session. This time, Ravi did not have to walk in uninvited. They sent for him. He entered the chamber looking worse than the last time. His overalls were patched in 3 places. His hands were cracked and dry from endless repair work. There were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of too many short nights in a storage closet. He looked like what he was, a tired man who had given everything he had and was now being asked to give the one thing he had left, his word. High Arbiter Suvin did not waste time on formality. The HFY fleet will reach this station in approximately 60 hours. Their communications have made their intentions clear. They are here for the Milori. If the Milori are surrendered, the fleet will withdraw. If they are not, the HFY have indicated they will treat Pallavi 9 as a hostile target. Suvin turned his amber eyes on Ravi. You hold the residency provision. You alone can revoke it. If you do, the Milori can be transferred to the HFY peacefully, and this station and its 40,000 residents will be safe. The chamber was quiet. Every eye, every lens, every sensory organ in the room was fixed on the small human standing in the center of the floor. Ravi breathed. In and out. Slow. The way he breathed when he was working on something delicate, something that required steady hands. You're asking me to hand over 200 people to the empire that destroyed their world, he said. I am asking you to consider the lives of 40,000 against the lives of 200, Suvin replied. The mathematics are simple. Maybe, Ravi said, but I did not make a promise to 40,000 people. I made a promise to 200. And one of them is a child who learned the word good because she heard me say it while fixing a water pipe. Suvin leaned forward. Sentimentality is not a strategy. No, Ravi agreed. It is not, but it is the reason I am standing here instead of hiding in my closet. And it is the reason I will not revoke the provision. A wave of sound moved through the chamber. Anger, frustration, fear dressed up as outrage. You are condemning this station, the Terali representative said, skin flushing a deep, furious red. Ravi shook his head. I'm not condemning anyone. I am refusing to be the man who hands a child to the people who burned her home. You can override me. You can strip my residency. You can throw me in a cell. But you cannot make me say the words. I will not revoke. He stopped talking. He had nothing else to say. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted over each other. Suvin called for order. Someone demanded a vote to forcibly override the provision. And then Dolly stood up. She was not a council member. She was an engineer. She had no formal right to speak. But she stood, all 7 feet of her, and the chamber went quiet because a Fennerai standing at full height with all 4 arms spread is not something any species ignores. The Fennerai Engineering Corps will stand with the human, she said. Her voice was clear and sharp. Not for politics. For principle. If this station surrenders refugees to an aggressor because it is convenient, then this station is not worth defending. Silence. Then a Kralith medic in the observer gallery stood. An old female with scarred scales and steady eyes. "I stand with the human," she said. At a Terali merchant stood. Then another. Then a group of station workers near the back. Maintenance crews and cooks and cargo handlers. The invisible people who kept Pallavi 9 running point one by one. Not a flood. A slow, steady current. Captain Oreni had been standing at the edge of the chamber throughout, arms folded, face unreadable. She was Fenari military. Chain of command was her religion. She did not act on emotion. She did not act on impulse, but she had watched a maintenance worker give up his home for strangers. She had watched him eat 1 meal a day so that refugees could eat 3. She had watched him sit on the floor of a broken ship with a frightened child and not move until the child felt safe. And she had spent her entire career defending things that were worth defending. She stepped to the communications console. She opened a broad spectrum channel, the kind that reaches across light years, the kind that everyone hears. Huracan Fleet, this is Captain Oreni of Pallavi 9. Be advised, this station is under the protection of its full resident population. All species, all residents. Any approach within weapons range will be treated as an act of aggression against every being on this station. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. She closed the channel. The chamber was silent. Suvin looked at Oreni. He looked at Dolly. He looked at the dozens of ordinary people standing in the gallery. He looked at Ravi. "You understand," Suvin said slowly, "that they will still come." "Yes," Ravi said. "And you understand that we may not survive." Ravi nodded. "Understand. But at least we will be worth surviving." Somewhere on deck 14, Ludo glowed a steady, warm amber. She did not know what was coming. She only knew that the man who said good to broken things had not left. And as long as he was here, the light did not go out. 6 warships dropped out of hyperspace like stones falling into still water, and every light on Pallavi 9 flickered. The Huracan heavy cruisers were built for one purpose, and beauty was not it. They were angular, dark, covered in weapon arrays that bristled from their hulls like the spines of some deep-sea predator. Each one was 3 times the size of Pallavi 9. Together, they formed a wall of metal and fire that blotted out the stars on the station's port side. Inside the station, nobody moved. 40,000 beings stood at windows, at screens, at observation decks, and watched the fleet settle into formation. The kind of formation that has no defensive purpose. The kind that exists only to say, "We are here, and you are small." On the command deck, Captain Oreni stood at the tactical display with her hands clasped behind her back. Around her, the station's skeleton defense team worked in tight, focused silence. They were not a military force. They were engineers, navigators, and communications officers who had volunteered to stay. Huracan Fleet is holding position at 400 kilometers, the sensor officer reported. Weapons are powered, but not locked. "They are waiting," Oreni said. "They want us to blink first." She did not blink. In the corridors below. The station had transformed over the past 60 hours. Not into a warship. Pallavi 9 would never be a warship, but into something that reflected every species that called a home. Fenari engineers, led by Dolly, had repurposed cargo drones into decoy ships, programmed to scatter and mimic the station's energy signature if the Huracan fired. It would not fool them for long, but it would buy time. Milori bioengineers, guided by the elder Pava, had done something no one on the station thought possible. They had grown organic shielding over the station's most critical hull sections, a living barrier of bioluminescent tissue that could absorb and redistribute energy from weapons fire. It would not stop a full assault, but it would soften the blow. Kralith navigators had mapped every debris field, asteroid cluster, and gravitational anomaly within range, creating a tactical map that turned the surrounding space into a maze that only Pallavi 9's defenders would know how to navigate. And Terali merchants, who had spent their lives reading the moods of trade partners across 100 worlds, had done something quieter, but perhaps more important. They had been broadcasting, not distress signals, Stories. They had sent the story of what happened on Pahlavi 9 to every station, outpost, colony, and trade hub within communication range. The story of a maintenance worker who gave up his home for strangers. The story of a council that said no, and a man who said yes. The Huracan commander hailed the station. His image appeared on the command deck's main screen. He was tall, armored, his face a pattern of bony ridges and deep-set eyes that reflected no light. He spoke with the calm certainty of someone who had never been told no. Pahlavi 9, you are harboring fugitives of the Huracan Dominion. Surrender the Milori population and the human responsible for their illegal residency. You have 1 hour. Captain Oreni looked at the screen. Then she stepped aside, and High Arbiter Suvin took her place. The old Kralith looked tired. He looked every one of his centuries. But when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a decision that had cost him something real. The Milori are registered residents of Pahlavi 9, Suvin said. Their residency was established through legal provision and is recognized by this council. Residents of this station are not surrendered to anyone, under any circumstances. The Huracan commander stared. You would risk your station for 200 insignificant refugees. I would risk my station for the principle that this station stands on, Suvin said. If we surrender our own people because a larger force demands it, then we are not a station. We are a cage. The channel went silent. The hour began. It was the longest hour in Pahlavi 9's history. Ravi spent it on Deck 14, sitting in the corridor outside the Milori quarters. Ludo sat beside him, glowing a steady, pale white. Trust. Around them, Milori families huddled together, their combined bioluminescence turning the corridor into a river of soft, shifting color. Ravi held Ludo's small hand. He did not speak. There was nothing to say. Either the Huracan would fire, or they would not. Either this was the end, or it was not. He had made his choice. He was at peace with IT at the 40-minute mark. The sensor officer on the command deck said something that made Captain Oreni turn sharply. New contacts. Multiple new contacts emerging from hyperspace. Oreni looked at the tactical display. Her mandibles parted. Ships. Not warships. Trade vessels, transport haulers, mining rigs, passenger liners. They were jumping in from across the sector, dozens of them dropping out of hyperspace in ragged, uncoordinated clusters around Pahlavi 9. They had no weapons. They had no military training. But they had received the Terali broadcasts, and they had come, not to fight, to witness. The galaxy was watching. The Huracan commander looked at the growing cloud of civilian ships surrounding the station. He looked at the organic shielding pulsing on the hull. He looked at the decoy drones drifting into formation. He looked at the old Kralith diplomat who had just told him no. And he calculated. The cost of firing was no longer 6 warships against a commerce station. It was 6 warships against a symbol. And symbols, the commander understood with the cold clarity of a military mind, are harder to kill than stations. You destroy a station, you create debris. You destroy a symbol, you create a legend. The Huracan fleet powered down its weapons, turned, and jumped to hyperspace without another word. Pahlavi 9 erupted. Ravi did not hear the cheering. He was still sitting in the corridor on Deck 14 when Dully found him 2 hours later. Ludo was asleep in his lap, glowing a deep, peaceful purple. The Galactic Press wants to speak with you, Dully said. 17 species have formally requested interviews with the human who held the line. Ravi looked up. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man who had not slept properly in a month. He looked like the most ordinary man in the galaxy. I did not hold any line, he said. I just did not know how to walk away from someone who needed help. Dully sat down beside him. She watched Ludo sleep. The child's glow warm and steady and safe. You know, Dully said quietly, the galaxy keeps underestimating humans. Why is that? Because they keep looking for the extraordinary ones. The warriors, the geniuses, the leaders. She paused. They do not realize that the most dangerous thing about your species is the ordinary ones. The ones who simply refuse to stop caring, no matter what it costs them. Ravi smiled. It was small and tired and real that in his lap, Ludo glowed white, steady and bright. Trust.